Hey everyone, it's Albert Lark Guitars. I'm excited to share that I recently visited one of my favorite guitar builders in California. Even before the trip, I knew I wanted to capture the experience to share it with you all. I understand that, like myself, before the visit, many of you may never have the chance to go in person, so I hope that this video gives you a glimpse into the craftsmanship and attention to detail that goes into building guitars. But before we get into that video, I want to give a big thank you to Tom, Marcus, and Rachel for the private tour. This year marks 40 years of Anderson guitars and their commitment to crafting and innovating some of the best guitars we've ever played. We hope you enjoy the tour and that it gives you some insight into how these guitars are made and why owning an Anderson is so special. Enjoy.
Alrighty. So yeah, let's see, maybe a few statistics to start with. So we've been in this shop since, I want to say 2012.
Okay.
The old shop was actually just down the road. Was maybe about a third of the size of this one. This is close to 12,000 square feet, and we're trying to build 1,200 guitars this year in here. So
1,200?
Yep. Yeah, we've been growing a little bit lately.
Yeah.
So I think last year we did 1,100 or close to 1,100. So we're trying to do 100 more this year. And then the years before we've done like 950 or maybe close to 1,000. So trying to do a little bit more based on demand. And then basically think of this as like 5 departments. Wood shop, so that's where we go first, where all the wood processing happens and all the woodworking. So that's basically everything that you see, left of these machines. The paint department, so that's where all the staining happens, all the finishing happens, including buffing over here. Then we have, behind this wall, we have final assembly. That's where all the guitars obviously get finally assembled. We have pickups and electronics. And then when you came in, you saw already the office, which is sort of like, its own department as well. So yeah, I would say let's start with wood.
Oh, that's so cool. You see the wood?
So this is our stash of body woods. One of the nice things about doing business in this area here is there's a lot of different guitar builders. Like, Sir is not too far, the Fender factory in Corona is not too far from here, Tyler Guitars is here, Shabbat Guitars, and so there's a whole industry that is sort of like built around guitar builders. And one of the nice things is, for example, that we can buy body blanks in this format rather than having to buy raw lumber and then we have to cut it up and glue it. So we actually buy the body blanks as you see in here. And then the nice thing is also, even that we get them as blanks already, you know exactly what weight you get. So I think they actually already get weighed on the supplier side, but then we weigh it again to make sure that it meets our weight specification.
That's nice.
Like, nobody really wants a heavy guitar, so you can see, like, for each body blank size we have a maximum weight that we like to see, and for the most part our suppliers are always good about staying within that spec. Once in a while you see that there's body blanks that are a little bit heavier, so sometimes we reject them or we do something else with them. In terms of woods, you see sort of like the usual swamp ash, which is probably the hardest to come by right now.
Keep hearing that.
Yeah, really only grows in one particular location, obviously in the swamp. This one here is alder, relatively easy to get, but also one of those classical or classic tone woods. And then here we're going into the mahogany and derivative section, a little bit of basswood here also. But yeah, I would say like the majority of our guitars are swamp ash, alder, and mahogany. And then you see sometimes what's pretty popular right now is
Oh, that's nice.
limba. This is what is called black limba, or it's also known as Corina.
Nice.
Sort of similar to mahogany in the way it sounds, but very colorful.
Yeah, the color's different.
Yeah. Then moving on here, we see our neckwoods.
Oh, so it's a different kind of wood?
a lot of the neck woods are, of course, maple. Here's a little bit more of an exotic one, if you will, rosewood. So this is a rosewood full neck blank. Right, so rosewood is pretty common for fingerboards. I mean, a lot of people are familiar with that. But of course, we also do complete rosewood necks. Right, but then these are mahogany neck blanks. And then here's all the different maple necks, neck blanks. It's actually all the same wood, even though you see two distinct colors. This one here is the regular maple or white maple, and then you can roast it and it turns into what we call caramel maple. So it's a process where they take the white maple and put it into a vacuum kiln, and so it's like a low oxygen, high temperature environment, and they literally bake it or roast it into that color.
Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, mainly, a difference in look, of course. There are some people that think they also sound a little different. We don't think they do sound all that different. The one thing that it does do to the wood, it seems to change the cellular structure a little bit. And so the wood, after it's being baked, is a little bit more stable. So if you think about wood, even though the wood is dead or the tree is dead, but the wood will still want to go and take on moisture in a wet environment or lose moisture in a dry environment. Right? So wood is constantly moving. And so, for example, right now it's pretty wet, so the wood will expand, right? If you take it to, let's say, Texas, where you guys are from, and it's dry, the wood will eventually shrink, right? And so the roasted maple seems to be a little bit less susceptible to taking on lots of moisture, losing lots of moisture. So net outcome for the guitar player is you need to not adjust your neck as often as you would have to adjust like a maple neck.
Oh, so that's why you're having to always adjust?
Yep.
It's because, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's why I'm like we're always.
Humidity really more. Temperature is not really all that much of a factor. But so if you think about the anatomy of a guitar neck, and you can actually see it in this one, right on cue. So when you build a neck, you have the piece of wood. The basic structure or the basic shape is now cut out. And then you insert what is called a truss rod into the neck. So there's a metal rod sitting sort of like curved in the neck that you can use to adjust the neck either into a front bow or into a back bow. Right?
Yeah.
So let's say you adjust this neck perfectly, but now the wood starts to take on moisture because it's raining outside. The wood will swell, but of course the metal rod will not swell because it's made out of metal, right? So that actually almost is the same as you are now tightening the rod. And so the neck would actually get, more straight. Versus if it loses moisture, the neck would, actually, am I thinking about this right? If it takes some moisture, it's like tightening the neck, the truss rod, so the neck will get more straight. The other way, it would actually go into a front bow, right?
Cool.
But so that's why we put the truss rod in there so that you can always have the neck in the perfect adjustment. And nice segue also. So in terms of how we produce guitars, so it starts all with the necks. So we actually don't build, if you think about like day one at Anderson, there were no guitar bodies, there were only necks. So we start with the necks first, and we actually get them to a certain place before we then start making bodies. And this is sort of like a good example. The first step is we take one of those neck blanks, we cut out the basic shape, we insert the truss rod. The next step from here on would be now laminating the fingerboard on, right, to hide that truss rod obviously also. Then install the frets or the fret slots, radius it, carve it, and then it would be close to being done.
And how long does that process take?
Oh, carving a neck, I mean, we get them to a point where they're not fretted, but all the CNC work is done within a week.
Okay.
So we try to do about 25, 26 necks a week. I would say like about a week altogether.
That's cool.
All the different fingerboard materials. Some of the more common ones. So here's a piece of rosewood. Right, so that would be, for example, that could go onto that neck. something we're pretty excited about is a wood called black heart. So this is actually starts as a purple heart, and then it gets roasted just like the maple gets roasted, and it turns into this black color. Yeah, so we use it as a alternative for ebony. So if somebody wants a real dark fretboard, usually ebony would be the choice. We don't like how ebony machines, and also the sound of ebony is very, very harsh and pingy sometimes. And also it has a very, it doesn't really have a lot of pores. So the way it feels under your fingers is something that we personally don't like. So we're pretty excited that we found this black heart wood, because it sounds like rosewood. It is darker than rosewood, obviously, but has sort of like the same grain structure as rosewood.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so here's Zero Coty. Very colorful, obviously. This kind of came along during, there was a time where you could not easily ship rosewood guitars or rosewood anymore, because it was there was a little bit of confusion with the CITES treaty or the CITES regulations, and so that's actually one wood that was not covered by it, and so that's why we started using it. But I mean, it's obviously very pretty in terms of grain structure, so it's still reasonably popular. And yeah, then, like I said, in terms of how we built the necks, this is maybe a better example, but same stage as the one that we just looked at. Right? So here we cut out the basic shape, installed the truss rod, put our T-nuts in, which is eventually where the neck is going to attach to the body. Right? So the screws will come through here. So this one would now be ready for fingerboard installation. Then it'll look like this. Right, so now here we basically put a maple fingerboard on a maple neck back, right, and you can still see the truss rod in there. And so this now would be ready for the next step, which would be radiusing the fretboard, putting all the fret slots in, and then eventually turn it over and carve the neck back shape out. Right, and then it'll look something like this. And that's pretty much how far we take them on the CNC. So you see the fingerboard is now radius 12 to 14 inch. All the fret slots are cut. We installed the fret markers, or the front dots and the side dots, and we also carved the neck back.
Cool.
Yeah, this one, I don't know why that one is in the trash pile. So this is all the stuff that we can't use. This one actually has quite a bit of back bow, which is not something that we want. So if you think about the geometry of a guitar, so the strings would run this way. The one thing that you don't want is the neck to naturally go this way, right? Because the strings would basically reach a high point somewhere here and start buzzing, right? So a guitar neck, you would always want to have it front bow rather than back bow. The type of truss rod that we use, that metal rod in the neck, can only be used to correct front bow back into a straight neck. But if the neck naturally wants to back bow, we cannot use the truss rod, our truss rod, single action truss rod, to get it back into alignment. So if we find a neck that naturally wants to back bow, we usually reject it, and then it unfortunately lives the rest of its life there.
Trash pile.
Yes. So yeah, and then when we're done with the necks from a CNC perspective, we actually let it sit for a while. So that's this rack here. So here you see roughly like the next 4 to 6 weeks of production next or so. The reason why we let them sit is simply because when you remove this much material from a piece of wood, the piece of wood is going to want to stress relief and get used to that new shape that it's in. And sometimes it'll twist and contort in ways that you don't care for when you build a guitar. So it's basically a quality control measure to put the necks here, let them sit for 30 days, let them get used to the new shape, And then after 30 days, come back and look, okay, is this still the way it should be? So then every week, we basically generate ourselves a list and say, okay, which ones are the next that have been sitting for some time, we inspect them, and if they are still looking good, then we actually generate ourselves another list to start making bodies for those necks.
Gotcha.
Right, but so neck production in our case is always
First.
30 days or so ahead of body production. Because we want to make sure that the neck is good before we make the body. And so then bodies.
Go ahead.
But this one here would be a relatively simple body, right? Swamp Ash Classic or Icon Classic in this case. With these ones, you literally take a block of, or a body blank of Swamp Ash, you would run it down to size, and then it goes into the CNC machine, and it basically gets carved from the top, from the back, and then obviously after that, lots and lots of sanding involved to make it smooth, but relatively simple. Mm-hmm. We also do a lot of maple-topped guitars. We're very much known for that. So there, what you do is you can't just take a block of bodywood, but you basically have to build yourself a body blank to make, right? So what you would do here is you would take, let's say, alder and then a flame maple top, but you first have to, before you start cutting into it, you have to actually laminate the maple top onto that alder backing wood, right? And so what you do is you cut the forearm contour into the backing wood, then lay out the maple top over that backing wood, and then laminate it and pull it over that forearm contour. And that happens in vacuum bags. So you literally take this, put it into a vacuum or into a bag and into a plastic bag, and then suck the air out. Mm-hmm. And the bag kind of like pulling the top over the curvature of the backing wood is what laminates the whole thing together, right? And so then you have a body blank, just like the body blanks that we saw there, and now then this would go into the CNC machine just like any other. But one of the nice advantages of this is that you can't see it here, but given that you have the body blank without the top on it, you can actually run cable channels in between, right? Versus like in this one, you know, this one is a little easier because all the cables will run here. But some of the guitars that are what we call rear routed, it is sometimes rather tricky to actually run cable channels.
Yeah.
And so then, once you have a fully carved body, this is what a maple top body looks like. Yeah, and you can see, for example, this is the channels that I was talking about, right? So, you know, there's a channel running basically here that I can now use to get, let's say when pickups get installed, I can drill into that channel and then run the cables into the control cavity in those channels that we put into the backing wood. Right? Similar here to get to the output jack that's eventually going to sit there. Right? Versus like if there's no maple top, you have to drill through here, and it's a little bit more complicated.
And the pattern that's on there, that's a natural wood pattern there?
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. This is just a piece of quilted maple. Yeah, that's just a natural wood. I can show you a block of maple. So you can kind of, if you look at the raw tree, you can already tell that it's a quill tree because once you remove the bark, it looks like quilt. And then, you know, here's what it looks like. You know, definitely the hardest to come by these days, quilted maple.
Mm-hmm. That's nice.
Yeah, only grows in the Pacific Northwest. And you can't go, there's no such thing as like signs in the forest, like, hey, here's where the quilted maple trees
cut it
are.
down.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah, it's a from what I understand, it's a genetic anomaly in the tree that basically makes it grow like this, right? And it's basically, instead of the wood fiber going all straight, it, like for example in regular maple, it's like the wood fiber doing something like this, right? And so then sometimes it's flame, sometimes it's quilt, But yeah, very difficult to find. So, given that it's genetic, you could take the seeds of this tree and plant another quilt maple tree. The only problem with that is like you have to wait like 200 years before it's this size. Right? So farming this is a multi-generational family business, I guess. And so then usually what you would see if the shop was operational, these are ascending benches. And so when the bodies are coming off and the necks come off the CNC, they're far from being done. I mean, you can tell, let's see, even if you feel the necks, they're still pretty rough. I mean, they're by no means, ready to be painted. I mean, if you feel this, I mean, it's pretty, it's pretty rough still, right? Like,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll show you you see there's tooling marks all over, right? So usually there's, 3 guys here in the wood shop that once everything is carved, they hand sand all the necks and all the bodies to get them ready for paint. But that's pretty much the wood shop. So, raw wood storage. All of these machines here and stations are all for sanding. And then these ones are 3 CNC machines.
The big machine.
This one is making necks. This one we predominantly use to make bodies. And then this one we mainly use as a spare, and we also do all the plastic parts on that one. So for example, pick guards, we carve there, tremolo back plates, all that kind of stuff happens on that one. Yeah, this one here currently is set up for tremolo back plates. Right, so the way how you hold material down on those machines is with negative air pressure.
Oh wow.
Right, so if you think, if you put a block of wood onto a CNC machine, and then this head starts carving, there's a good amount of force that is exerted onto that piece of wood. So you have to make sure that you hold it in place nice and tight. You can see it in here. So this is a body fixture, and so you see these pads, if you will, but it's basically air sucking down the wood onto the fixture itself.
So it doesn't move.
Correct. Yeah. So these ones here are the locators, right? So that you know where you are. So we would take the piece of wood, put the locator holes in it, and then press it down onto that fixture, and then negative air pressure would keep it down. Right? So not a whole lot, but enough to keep it in place.
I bet they're loud.
Well, depends. Sometimes it can get loud. Yeah. Well, yeah. It's not. Yeah. Usually it's just if I would put the dust collection on, so you see like, oh, this here is the dust collection that basically takes all the wood dust away from people, because it that could be pretty toxic to inhale, obviously too. And we want our employees to live a long, healthy life. So like, for example, these tables here, you see like they have holes. So if I put the dust collection on, whatever you're sending on this desk, all the dust and stuff would get sucked into this table, get into the dust collection system, and then goes outside. Wow. Right, where we collect all the dust. So it's like I think it's like 7 barrels of dust every week, roughly. So it's a lot of dust. So that's pretty much the wood shop. Now we're going to go into the paint department. Okay.
Be careful, don't touch anything.
Let's start with the stain room. Turn the light on in here. So when the guitars are fully sanded, they come in here, and so now you can see, like, if you've touched this, that is very smooth, right? So this is a fully sanded body, same as what we saw out there in Icon Classic. This one appears to, or happens to be alder, so this one actually doesn't need much processing in here. Alder is not a wood that you need to fill, and maybe I should talk about filling a little bit. So if you look at some woods, like for example swamp ash, you can sort of tell that the wood has open pores. And if you would try to paint this wood, the paint would try to get into the pores but couldn't. And then you don't end up with a very flat surface. And even if you paint and you sand it, you will then have more holes in that surface. So what makes the most sense is actually you take this wood and you grain fill swamp ash. And so that's this station here where you take literally a paste that looks like this.
We coat it.
Yeah, and you basically rub it into the holes, into the grain. It's a pretty gnarly job because you want to get the grain filler into the grain, but you can't have any excess grain filler on the guitar itself, especially if it is eventually painted, let's say, in a transparent color, right? Because the grain filler would look different when you paint it. So you have to get it into all the grain, and then you have to make sure that you wipe it all off or sand it all off so that no excess grain filler is actually on the guitar itself. So grain filling happens in here, and then of course the staining happens in here. We don't really have a lot here. So here you see a piece of maple that has been stained black. And usually that's only the first step of a particular stain. We'll probably see some in the paint room. So this could, for example, be what we call our Cajun finishes. So you would stain it black, then you actually sand most of that black off again. And you can sort of tell here, when you start sanding it off, the wood obviously has soft parts and hard parts. The soft parts will retain the stain easier than the hard parts. So when you start sanding this off, you can actually kind of make the grain pop by only having the soft parts retaining the stain and the hard parts kind of like looking natural again. Bad example on this one here though. Doesn't look like much. Here's a better example. Right. So this one is also a Cajun red, so it gets stained black. And then we sand basically most of that black off, and then we would stain it or spray it red.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that's how the guitars get that look.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's another
Interesting.
one.
And it's all different.
Yeah, these ones are just the first stage of the staining process. We'll see some more fancy stuff, I'm sure. Yeah, like this is something new I guess we're working on. Cajun yellow, I suppose this would be. So, you know, this is a cutover piece from the wood shop that we just use for testing purposes.
Cool.
You know, purple mixes. And also, of course, always very important, we always monitor our humidity levels. Yeah. And yeah, this is all staining here. These are all the different stains that we use. So yeah, this room would be grain filling, staining, and then we basically go over to the spray booth itself. So here you see all the necks that correspond to the bodies that are in the stain room. Right? So the procedure is, once we pull above the rack that you saw earlier, they get the same week that we pull in, they get fretted. If it's say for example a rosewood fingerboard or non-maple fingerboard neck, we just tape them up so that when we paint the neck we don't get anything onto the fingerboard itself. The maple necks are a little different. Given that maple is so light in color, we want to paint the fingerboard obviously as well so that you don't see like finger grime and dirt on the fingerboard. But then when you paint the neck, you can't do some of the fretwork anymore, right? So on the maple necks, we actually do part of the fretwork, then paint it, then have to actually remove the paint from the frets after it was painted, and then do the final fretwork and leveling. But so the maple necks hang here because the builders that actually do the fretwork have to come out here and do the initial part of the fretwork, like the fret ends, before we paint the necks. Yep.
Cool.
And then this is our paint booth. Little stinky in here.
Oh, I love it.
So easiest way to think about this is, so this is where actually all the spraying itself happens. So here we have a rack of base coated guitars, but so when you start spraying, obviously you're going to be in full hazmat with outside air supply because you can already smell the aroma in the air. But you will go in here, the raw guitar goes onto this stick, and then you can rotate it around and basically spray in whatever pattern you want, right? So, oftentimes I would start down here, do all the sides, and then do the front surfaces.
I like that wood.
Yeah, and then this is obviously, all the air is get sucked out of this, and the paint lands in those filters that we then change. But yeah, these ones they have just gotten the first isolator coat on them. So you see, for example, here is a little stained guitar. All right, so that's a strawberry wake surf, we call it. So this is all hand applied, and so the first isolator coat is just to lock everything in. It's a pretty thin layer of urethane. All right, and now the next thing is, in the process, they would get scuffed, so they need to be sanded, and then they would get base coated. Lots and lots of, not lots and lots of layers, but life cycle of a guitar in paint is one isolator coat, we call it the wash coat. Then you shoot 4 clear base coats on it. Then any color that the guitar would need, let's say a burst, or if it's a solid color, then 4 layers of clear coat again, and then 3 layers of top. And all of our finishes that we do here are polyurethane and polyester. One of the things, it's a very durable and very nice finish, but one of the things that is a little different compared to nitro is there's no chemical bond between the different paint layers. So you have to actually sand scratches into the guitar so that the next layer of paint has something to grab onto in the old layer of paint. Otherwise you get delamination issues. So like these ones, for example, you can tell like they're reasonably shiny. We don't like shiny because if you would try to put the next layer, which would be 4 base coat layers on here, without sanding this, it would not stick. It would eventually peel off. So next step is sanding, and more sanding. That's the paint booth. This is our curing oven. So we use a dual cure polyester, so the paint itself actually would cure by itself, and you can actually cure it much faster by putting it into an ultraviolet light source. So what this thing is here is you can see like there's a stick in here too. That stick rotates, and then this barrel rotates onto the other side of this chamber where we have ultraviolet lights, and then the guitar gets rotated in there for 15 seconds 3 times, and then the entire paint is done and cured to the point that you can immediately start sanding it.
Wow.
Yep.
Gonna get my
And
notes.
so here we have, these ones actually look top coated, so Clio top coated. So yeah, this is a ginger burst. Right, and so you can see like the layers. Right, so this started out with brown that got sanded off, right, to bring the grain out, and then we shot amber in the middle and then a cherry around it. Right, so sort of like a mix between a stain and a spray-on finish, and then the back is just a regular cherry. Right, or this one is pretty nice. So this is just one batch. This is a complete spray-on finish. This is Bora in the middle to a blue burst. And so those are pretty far along, but you can see like there's a lot of orange peel still. So they need to be sanded, polished. And I think those ones only have been clear coated, so not yet top coated. So the next step here would be make them flat, sand them, make sure they're all good, and then 3 layers of top coat. Yeah. This one is also nice. This is probably a ocean turquoise.
It's pretty cool.
Kind of like a metallic paint. Yeah, pretty popular these days.
I've been wanting a rating for a while.
So yeah, let's get out of here. Pretty stinky. So here you see guitars sort of like in the middle of the painting process. These ones here have been base coated. So you can see like there's a fair amount of paint on it, but the purpose of the base coat is basically just to make sure that you have, or you can create a flat surface for yourself. So you on purpose put, I don't want to say like a lot of paint on it, but a little bit more paint on it, and you want to then be able to sand it to a completely flat surface. Right, so right now you can tell like it looks pretty globby on there, but about, I don't know, like 60-70% of that paint will come off, and then it'll look more like this. Right, so you can see like these are very dull, and so they have been sanded flat and scratchy for the next layer of paint to go on. Right, and then these ones are all the different painted necks. And here you see the buffing station. So that's where all the guitars have been shiny.
Ooh.
So see, this one is still, this one actually went all the way into assembly. Then the assembler or the builder inspected the body and found a few things that he would like to get fixed. And so we mark it with like a grease pen. And so then tomorrow morning, when Tina comes back, he will work on that one more time. And it's sort of like part of our quality control system that each station, let's say if the paint department receives a body from the wood shop, they make sure that the body meets spec and is the way it should be. Similarly here, when the body goes into final assembly, the final assemblers look, okay, is the body really free of any, blemishes? If they find something, they actually clear it back here and we sand it one more time or buff it one more time. These ones here are all ready for final buffing, so these ones have been top coated. This one is an interesting one.
Sheer.
Lark?
Yeah, sheer, exactly. So you see like it has like this silver sparkle in it. So it's a little shimmery. Looks pretty cool on the stage light. And it's also a nice top and a nice stain job. Purple wake surf. Purple back. Yeah, you can see the flake a little bit better. These ones here are interesting ones. So I talked a little bit about grain filling earlier. So typically on a body that we need to fill the grain in order to paint it, you would use a grain filler that is complementary to the body or to the wood color. But of course you can also have fun with it. So in this case, this is what we call our dog hair finishes. We actually do sort of like the opposite. So we would paint the body black with the open pores. Then we put white grain filler in, and then we would spray transparent turquoise or bora over it, and that gives you the impression that the grain is actually filled with like a blue grain filler, right? Whereas in reality, it's a black backing, white grain filler, and then bora on top of that. So it looks pretty cool. Yeah, excited about this one. This is actually one of mine. So I'm gonna.
Oh, really?
That's yours?
Yeah.
I love that finish, dude.
Satin seafoam green. Yep. And then these ones here are fretting stations. We don't, the vices are just to hold the fixtures. So the idea here would be the frets are being installed in the wood shop, but all the fret work is actually done by whatever person assembles the guitar, does final assembly on the guitar.
Okay.
Fret work is a little bit of a dirty job, right? Because I mean, you're using, you're filing, it's pretty loud, and then you're polishing a lot. So we do it out here. But the idea is that you would basically put the neck into a fixture that would simulate the tension on the neck, and then you level the frets and the board and everything under that tension. Unfortunately, I don't see. I mean, Doug was out here before. Oh, actually, yeah, I'll show you that fixture once we're in there.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just all pickguard material. You'll wonder what a tortoiseshell pickguard looks like before it gets cut into a guard.
Oh,
That's
nice.
cool.
That's what that stuff looks like, and you can also see like there's quite a bit of variation sometimes in the color. Because if you think about like how that stuff is being made,
Yeah.
they literally have like a giant tub. They throw all different sorts of color plastic in there, and then they swirl it around.
I've seen that.
Yeah, and then they basically cut it into, they shave like a really thin layer off, and then laminate it onto like a tri-ply,
so
vinyl or
that's
whatever
how
this
it's
material
done.
is. But yeah, so depending on what they use,
I like
it'll look
that.
a little different. Yeah, I like this a lot. Nice and yellow. Compared to, I'm not a huge fan of this. This is a little too red for me. But this almost looks like the surface of the sun. Like
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes in pictures. It's pretty crazy. And then you get the same stuff in black. Right, so this is black pearl. Sort of like the same concept, just like a different texture. And then these ones are all the different vacuum fixtures for the Fidel to make pick guards. Right, so you can tell like a piece of that pick guard material will go on here, and then these ones are the channels that actually suck the pick guard material down, and then the tooling path here.
Sweet.
Nice.
Yep. Cases, of course. I would say the majority of our guitars ship in hard shell cases. The reason why we open them up like this is just because the cases get manufactured here in Los Angeles, and when they glue them together, there's quite a bit of moisture in the case. And so if you don't get rid of that moisture and you would put a guitar in there, you would immediately have the guitar neck in particular take on that moisture, and you would end up with necks that are straighter than you would like them to be.
Interesting.
So we basically open them up, make sure that all that moisture is gone before we use the case. A little bit of a pain to have to do that, but there's really no substitute. So this is pickups and electronics. So I'm sure you have seen the end result, which, this would be a regular humbucking pickup or humbucker pickup. And then this is one of our single coils here. Right, so this is what a finished pickup looks, or finished pickups look like. But of course it all starts with the bits and pieces. So here you see the pull pieces, right, which are stainless steel rods. Right, so for most of our pickups, those are actually not magnets. Only for Alnico 5, those are the actual magnets. So those are just steel rods that are used to focus the magnetic field. Right, and then these ones here are the bobbins that I talked about before. Right, so they are all cut on the laser out of a fibrous material, vulcanized fiber. And then you basically turn them into what is called a bobbin. Right, so you press the pull pieces and the base plate together on this press here. Right, and then you can start winding pickups. So these ones here are our pickup winders. So the bobbin would go onto these, right, and then you basically wind copper wire around it. Right, and so this is what the copper wire looks like.
Oh my gosh. Looks like
Yeah.
a redhead.
Yep. Looks like a wig, right?
Yeah.
It's like, if you feel it, it's like thinner than a hair.
It is, yeah.
So if you wonder why that is here, it's like, well, if the wire breaks before you're done, there's really no way of fixing it. So you have to take it all off and start all over again, right? So you see the spools of wire down there, or here's a full spool. Right?
Nice.
And there are different gauges, different insulations on there. And then you wind pickups.
It's crazy.
And these ones are still the winders that Tom used to actually start the business. So when Tom left Schecter in 1984, his first business was basically making pickups for Schecter. And those are the winders that he used in his garage, and we still use them to this day.
It's crazy.
Yep. And then here's all the different cover options. Right, so, like for example, single coils, you have those plastic covers that you put over. All different colors. Same with humbucker covers, and then here are pickups that are in the process of being made. Right, so these ones here are pretty far along. Right, like the two coils are there. So this is what is called a stack. So the idea here is the top coil is the one that hears the string and gives you the majority of the sound, and the bottom coil is actually just used for hum canceling, right? And then you see the magnet, a bar magnet sitting in between those two coils. Right, versus, same concept here, a humbucker. So you have two coils that are reverse wound to each other. So you can use those to hum cancel. And this one here is basically the same concept, just that you have the two coils not sitting side by side, but underneath. Right. Yeah, I mean, these ones are all finished pickups. So you see, there's a whole bunch of different series of pickups, and then some of the more popular ones, and there's plenty of pickups in here. So we sell them individually, as well as obviously we need to make pickups for our production guitars. And then here are some already pre-assembled pickups, so even more pickups. Yeah, and then this station here is where all the electronics magic happens. So we're also known for our tricked out switching solutions. And so here you see the beginnings of a wiring harness. So this is what a 5-way switch looks like. Volume pot, push-pull tone pot. Right? So you can pull up on this and you have more function in this one. And so then we put everything into these templates so that when you basically wire this all up, you know exactly how long those wires need to be, so that when you put it into the guitar, everything fits. So here's what a finished harness can look like. Right, so this is the 5-way switch. This is for a Icon Classic, so volume pot, and then two push-push tone pots that you can use to do different things with. Right, and so this one now this is the way how it basically mounts back into the guitar. And you can drop it right in. Oh no, we still.
Yeah, that was the original, right?
Yeah. So this is the assembly shelf. So all the necks and all the bodies that are coming out of paint end up on this shelf. Then we have a list for the builders to see what is the assembly priority. And so they would grab a body. This one is a nice one by Tiger Eye Burst. Natural Arctic Blue. Almost looks like stone washed.
Yeah. Denim.
Maui Kazawi.
Who comes up with all the names?
I would say mainly Roy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've always wondered who
Roy's
came
the
up with
naming master. This one here is what I talked about before with dog hair finishes, right? So same thing here. We basically, instead of filling the grain right away, we actually put a white base coat down and then filled black. But in this one, actually, you can feel like the grain is not completely closed. So it has like an open grain or organic grain texture to it. It's pretty popular.
And how long until they make it here to this rack?
I would say probably like 2.5 months or so, right? So think about like we take about a week to make the necks, then the necks sit for a good 3 weeks or so. So that's a month right there. Then we make the bodies, fret the necks, so that's another week. Then they probably go into pain for like sometimes 3 weeks or so. So yeah, 2.5 months before they're here. Right now this is pretty slim pickings. Usually this shelf is a little bit fuller. But yeah, we've been, building more guitars than we painted lately. So yeah, the painters are, the assemblers are, so to speak, ahead of schedule, if you will. Yeah, should be all good. Yeah, and so what happens is the builders go in here, they figure out which ones are the next bodies and necks to build, or the guitars to build. They're all numbered, as you can see, right? And so, if I go here and I find 2003, there should be a neck somewhere here that I can pick. Even though I can't find it right now, but it should be somewhere in there. And so then they would take the neck and the body and then start assembling. Here we have some guitars sort of like in progress. Right, so sometimes they start with loading the body, so the hardware, bridge was go in, all the electronics go in. In this case, Art, who is the builder who works at this station, seems to have done the neck fit first. Right, so basically making sure that this is a perfect fit. Right, and the fret work on this one is done already too. So still, all the electronics need to be loaded. Nut needs to be cut. Still a fair amount of work to do on this one. All of our strings, so we actually get them in this format, right, rather than curled up. So they come in long boxes that you see in the corner there. And so yeah, Doug is out there doing the neck work right now, but I can show you. So this one is one of those fixtures that I talked about, right? So the neck would basically go in here. The idea is that you would attach it here just like you would attach it to the body. And then you can use this one here to simulate the tension that the neck would be under. So when we put it into the fixture, we actually bring it, by adjusting that metal rod, we bring it into a very slight back bow. And then, so we put tension on the neck, and then we simulate the string tension with this little stamp, so that the neck is, obviously perfectly straight, but sort of in a configuration similar to what it would be like on the guitar before we do the fret work. So eventually, when the builders are ready, the guitars end up in here. This is sort of like final quality control and setup. So I usually do the setups first. So I see the guitars first, that's my testing corner. And then I line them up. And this is Tom's testing corner. And so then he gives it the final quality control and stamp of approval. So all these guitars I already played last week. So he'll look at them tomorrow.
Hard work.
Or maybe later today.
Hard work.
Well, I can imagine a few worse things.
Yeah.
And then these ones are last week's production guitars. So I'll play all of these tomorrow on Wednesday. Right, and then the display cases are prototypes, leftovers. But like this one is the first ever Angel 7 prototype we built. Unfortunately, we had to cannibalize it a little bit. So it's missing electronics and the bridge right now. But yeah, first ever Angel 7 that got carved. Proto 1. Cotton candy blue guitar that we made.
Cotton candy blue.
Yep.
I love the names.
That actually, I think our paint manager Patrick came up with. And then Yeah, these ones here are prototypes where we experimented a little bit with inlays. So you can see, like,
Oh, interesting.
yeah. So it's something we're just experimenting with for the 40th anniversary. But so then we made a guitar.
I should not post that part. I'm not posting
You
this.
can. That's fine. This is just a prototype.
Okay.
It's not going to look like that. We just wanted to experiment a little bit with it, see what it feels like, what it looks like. But yeah, these ones are my personal guitars, and then these ones are Tom's personal guitars. Yeah, then from here they basically ship out.
There you go, guys. 40 years of Anderson making these awesome instruments. If you'd like to own your own and custom spec your own, call us, email us, DM us. We'll help you out in that process. And if you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe to Lark Guitars. We hope that we're going to be posting more content like this and hopefully some more Guitar Factory tours. I'm not sure, but you got to follow us. Peace.